Hey, brother! Okay, guys, as ever, when delving into the story of Encanto, I think it is very important to keep in mind that it is almost a requirement for this film to be as bright and colorful as it is, because the underlying themes themselves are pretty dark. I mean, everything from the generational trauma, to the war that displaced Abuela and Pedro, to the fact that Pedro literally sacrificed himself just to give his family a chance, or the fact that Abuela was going to have to raise these 3 triplets as a single parent. This stuff is hard and heavy, and that's not even the half of it. And it's like this the whole way through. But in the end, I feel like it's all ultimately worth it because of the themes that it can communicate in the process. So that being said, today we thought we'd go even darker for some reason and ask one of our all-time favorite questions: what if? Specifically, what if the story plays out exactly as we always know it to, all the way up until Isabella's song with Mirabel, "What else can I do?" We know this is where their relationship in particular takes a huge step forward, and possibly for the first time ever, they understand each other fully.
You're a bad influence.
But this also comes with a bit of a price, because as we all know, Abuela is not particularly happy with the gigantic mess that they have created through their bonding. They've effectively threatened the reality as Abuela knows it, and the ramifications of this end up being much more severe than anyone probably could have predicted. The miracle, which of course gives everyone in the house their powers, has been fractured over the years, but has officially and finally broken. And with that, so does Casita, which starts crumbling all around the entire family. We watch as Casita tries to take each of the individual members of the family and shuffle them to safety, and Bruno literally just charges through a wall. Everyone is of course scrambling for the candle, which represents the miracle, and Casita is doing everything it can in an effort to protect Mirabel. And normally, overall, it's pretty successful and prevents Mirabel from suffering any physical harm. But what if Casita couldn't do it all? What if the home was unable to protect every member of the family? And so more importantly, what if Mirabel didn't survive the destruction of Casita and the miracle? Today, we find out. Okay, I told you guys today's episode could be a tad bit on the darker side, but stick with me, I think it's worth it. As we all know, the miracle is first set into place 50 years prior to the start of the film, when Alma and Pedro are forced from their homes with the triplets. When the family and the rest of the fleeing town have essentially reached an impasse, where something or someone is going to have to stay behind to prevent the oncoming troops from pressing forward. And in a lot of ways, I'm really grateful that we don't actually know what actually happens here, but we do know the ultimate outcome. Pedro sacrifices himself so that Alma, the kids, and the rest of the refugees can make it to safety. And it's this sacrifice that ultimately grants Alma and the rest of the Madrigal family with the miracle, their gifts and Casita. And those gifts, while absolutely extravagant, are not intended to be showpieces, if you will, but simply provide the family with everything that they need to survive. Because when you think about the 3 gifts that the triplets receive at their first ceremony, they're all things that a young civilization might need. Peppa and her ability to provide safe weather, Julieta and her ability to heal others, and Bruno's ability to see what drove them from their homes in the first place, a pending potential threat. And these gifts clearly work out magnificently as the family and the town around them prospers. Julieta and Peppa grow up to have families of their own, while Bruno adopts what I can only describe as cool uncle status. Not to brag, but I've got some experience in that myself. And at this point, you can really only imagine that Abuela would just be overjoyed to be surrounded by her happy and healthy, thriving family. The only real possible exception here is the ongoing mourning of the loss of her husband. But, and this might come as a bit of a surprise, I'm not totally sure that she's completely without him. I speak, of course, the thought that while Pedro is in fact, of course, gone, he lives on through the heart and soul of the house itself. Pedro is Casita. He loves and looks after the family, helps them in any way that he can, whether it's decorating the house for a celebration or helping prepare for dinner, and in some certain cases, protecting the family physically. Even expanding the interior of the wall so that your one estranged son still has a safe place to live close to the rest of the family. that one's kind of sad. But these are all the things that you could expect from a loving and proud father. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice that Casita, who totally has a life of its own, only actually takes orders from Alma.
Casita? As I was saying.
And you could just simply make the argument that Abuela is the matriarch of the family, so of course that fits, but I think it's something more than that. Because we also know that later in the film, Abuela literally addresses Pedro directly and asks him for help.
I need you.
She actually believes that it is Pedro who sent her exactly what she needed at the end of the film. Mirabel.
He sent me you.
These acknowledgements to me absolutely make me feel like she believes he's still there. On top of that, even as later in the film Casita is crumbling, there's this like one specific shot of the portrait of Pedro falling as the house falls around it. And then you also have the fact that the symbol of the miracle itself is actually a butterfly. This is important because that song at the end of the movie, Dos Oruguitas, that makes you absolutely weep, is actually about two caterpillars who fall in love and have to let go so that eventually they can reunite as butterflies. Alma and Pedro are clearly the butterflies in this metaphor. She's of course just physically still there, but he has been reborn as the miracle, which is symbolized by the butterfly because he's still there. We actually have an entire video explaining this particular idea. If you'd like to check that out, you can do so by clicking the card. Otherwise, just trust me, Pedro is Casita. Plus, it also just kind of like makes me happy to feel like Abuela isn't just alone, and also that Pedro gets to see his family grow and prosper in a unique way. Unfortunately though, we also know everything that transpires with the passage of time. That Abuela eventually grows to value the gifts more than the family itself. This is of course on its fullest display when we see the way that Mirabel feels like a total outsider within her own family because she was not granted a gift, but also with Isabel, who feels like she can't be herself in the name of being the perfect child, or Luisa, who can conceivably lift literally anything and is also being crushed under the weight of expectations. Peppa can quite literally control the weather as long as it doesn't end up controlling her right back.
Peppa, you have a cloud.
I know, Mama.
Which, in case you missed that one, weather is metaphor for emotions. Then there's Bruno, who has quite literally hid himself from the entire family for a decade, believing that they don't want him to be there. Or Dolores, who's having to sit idly by while the man that she loves is being engaged to her cousin. Instead of embracing all of these children for who they are all being judged on the basis of what they can provide to the family. And as time goes on, this grows to be so contrary to the function, the purpose of the miracle, that it itself starts to crumble. This is everything that we know that brings us to our question of the day, which again is, what would happen if Mirabel had also perished alongside the miracle? This is really dark and hard to imagine, but as the story already goes, this almost happens. As the house is crumbling around her, Casita is only able to save Mirabel with its last ounce of magic. If it had failed even a second or two sooner, then Mirabel doesn't make it out of this. And then what? Would the family just lose their powers forever? Would they ever reunite with Bruno? Would the miracle just be gone along with their powers? And I think the answer is really yes and no to all of the above. But guys, we need to pause right there to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Gooder, because you know there's good and then there's good. Guys, I could not be more excited for today's sponsor because Gooder, in case you are unaware, makes some of the best activewear sunglasses on the market that don't slip, don't bounce, and are 100% polarized. Literally no exaggeration whatsoever. I was so excited when I found out that Gooder wanted to sponsor the channel. I have been wearing them for years and they are my favorite sunglasses on the market at just $25 a pop. In case you are unaware, Gooders were originally designed with runners in mind, which is how I personally found them myself. So they're specifically intended to be comfortable, stable on the face, and wearable for long periods of time. But what I very quickly discovered is that yes, while they're absolutely great for all of the activities that I do out there in the world, they're also just super stylish and durable. I've probably dropped this exact pair a million times and they're still perfect. A quick anecdote about me is that with my very first paycheck that I ever earned in my life when I was 16 years old, I used to go and buy an expensive pair of sunglasses, which lasted on my face for about 4 hours before I jumped in the lake and they sank to the bottom. That is a true story. But the super great thing about Gooders is that while they probably won't break, if you do happen to lose them in the process of one of your activities, they are only $25 a piece, so they are in fact replaceable. Not to mention, Gooder also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 1-year warranty. Honestly, they're great for running or cycling or going to the beach, hiking, anything outdoors or active or not. Recently, I finished my first marathon. I had Gooders on my face the whole time, and I never worried about them slipping off. So if you would like to support the show and pick up a pair, Gooder is giving free shipping to Super Carlin Brothers viewers. I'll throw a link in the show notes to go and check them out. If you've seen pretty much any picture of me on the internet anywhere wearing sunglasses, they were probably Gooders. That link is going to be gooder.com/super, promo code SUPER to get free shipping on your order. Gooder also offers that 30-day money-back guarantee. And again, that link is going to be gooder.com/super, promo code SUPER for free shipping. One last time, gooder.com/super, promo code SUPER, link in the description down below. As it stands already, the town itself is not really privy to what is happening within the walls of Casita. It doesn't know about the drama between Mirabel and Alma and the rest of the family. And as a result, at the destruction of Casita, they all show up in hordes to help the family rebuild the home as a thank you for all they've done for the town. So I think all of this still happens regardless, except this go round, possibly they're also rebuilding the home in memory of Mirabel. As for the family's powers, they'd still be gone just in the same way that they usually are during this sequence anyway. But while the home may be rebuilt, can the family do the same? Can they recover the miracle without Mirabel? For one, I can absolutely see Julieta being absolutely furious with her mother for the scolding that she gave Mirabel that ultimately caused the house to crumble and the loss of her daughter. And even earlier in the movie, we see Julieta talking with Mirabel before Antonio's ceremony, where she is just absolutely reinforcing her unconditional love for Mirabel, reminding her, you have nothing to prove.
You have nothing to prove.
In a lot of ways, it's actually this specific sentiment that Mirabel's father is reflecting on at the end of the movie when he says, she takes after you. Because Julieta still has her values in exactly the right place. It never mattered to her that Mirabel didn't have a gift, and that's something that she was able to instill into Mirabel herself. And as a result, what led to the breaking of the miracle to Julieta would immediately be very obvious and clear. And all of the resentment that she may have felt towards her mother throughout all the years where she didn't treat Mirabel equally would come exploding out. And for her part, I think Abuela would be absolutely racked with guilt. I think the loss of her granddaughter and the anger of her own daughter would immediately ring true the meaning of the miracle and where not Mirabel went wrong, but Abuela did. This may even be the first time since that fateful day when Pedro was lost when Abuela has all of her values aligned where they're supposed to be. Because the thing that she had feared the most, losing another member of the family, had come to pass. And I think it's this guilt that would drive Abuela to flee to the river where Mirabel normally goes, either in an effort to commune with Pedro like she did earlier in the film from her bedroom, or possibly just Abuela leaving altogether in the same way that Mirabel did, thinking that her family is better off without her. And that said, normally it is Abuela who comes to find Mirabel here at the river. But in this case, I actually think that it would be Luisa and Isabella who would go and find Abuela there. Because while everyone else may be upset, and I'm sure that these two would be no exception to that, they're also the ones who connected with Mirabel the most leading up to the incident. This is also normally when Bruno shows up to try and accept the blame for the destruction of the house, although this particular go-round, that honor would not be up for grabs. More likely, I think in this case, Bruno would re-enter the story by approaching his sister, Julieta, to whom I think he could explain just how much Mirabel helped him personally. How he had given up on himself and what role he had inside of the family. Exactly the same way that Abuela is now. And the thing that Mirabel would want the most is for her to forgive her mother. Honestly, guys, I'm not even sure any of us deserve Mirabel. She's just so good. But that's the thing. Mirabel's loss is more than enough to divide the family, for fingers to be pointed and for blame to be assigned. But that's where I think that the impact left on her family by Mirabel herself would simply be too great. I think it's exactly what Mirabel herself understood and was actively working against. It's the very thing that she was taught by her own mother, this idea that you have nothing to prove. Because at the end of the day, the real meaning and purpose and function of the miracle was for this entire family to be able to be together. And so I think the result here is that truly honoring Mirabel's memory is not living divided. It would be embracing one another in both the good and the bad. And this is the part of the story where I think things get really good. Abuela will be at the river where Pedro died with Luisa and Isabella. Really, this is the place where everything started. And I think what Abuela will realize is that she never really let go of Pedro or accepted his passing. But she clung so tightly to the miracle because it allowed in this strange way for him to live on through Casita. But it's also here that she's finally willing to realize the truth, that Pedro doesn't live on through Casita. He lives on through his children and grandchildren. Again, it's everything that was able to be because of his sacrifice, the true, real meaning of the miracle. And so as the family comes back together, it will be through Mirabel's sacrifice that the magic will be reborn once again. And in the normal story, I've always interpreted the ending like the passage of a torch. Abuela herself didn't have a gift of her own, but she was the keeper of the miracle. By the end of the film, she realizes that Mirabel didn't not receive a gift because she was any less important or less special, but because someday somebody was going to need to be able to take over this mantle from Abuela and serve that same role. And it would of course be the one person who would truly understand why the miracle was there in the first place: Mirabel. But obviously this go round, Mirabel won't be there to accept that particular role. So I once again go back to that line from her father where he says, "She takes after you." He's of course saying that Mirabel takes after her mother, Julieta. But who did Julieta take after? In this case, it's probably the member of the Family Madrigal who valued togetherness above all else. It's exactly what we just said. The one who lives on through his children. Pedro. Mirabel's mother, Julieta, would become the new keeper of the miracle, which already feels like such a natural succession from mother to daughter, and the magic would once again be reborn. But possibly even more importantly than that is with Abuela's final acceptance of Pedro's loss, there would also be a new void needed to be filled. I'm speaking, of course, of the identity of Casita, who will once again come to life to love and support its family. Except this time, it will have a brand new persona. The person whose memory was in the minds of the townspeople as the house was rebuilt. I personally think the family would catch glimpses now and then, thinking it was just Camillo up to his usual tricks. But having fixed what was broken, the miracle is alive once more. And Casita is alive and well, wondrous as ever. Or should I say, Mirabel. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to let us know any other what ifs about Encanto you'd like for us to answer. In the meantime, if you would like to watch some more Encanto action from us, you can check out this video right here where we talk about what if Mirabel actually received a dark power. It's really interesting and a lot of fun. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!